So, who in here wants to feel Plone fast and snappy? Raise your hands. So almost everybody. Who had problems in past with the performance of Plone? Raise your hands. So most of the half of the people. Okay. So that's why I talk today about the RelStorage. The main difference here is that Oracle is expensive. MySQL is difficult to handle, and Postgres is easier to handle and works for us. And we never tried Oracle because we never had projects with an Oracle in back, but it should work well with it. And we love RelStorage because of that, because there are some advantages. It's up to 2 times as fast as with ZODB. Depends on your tunings, right? If you do nothing, it's like 1 to 3 times or something like that. But if you do a lot of tuning, it's really fast. Thus you get more concurrent connection, more concurrent writes through it. So if your editors experience in your setup write conflicts or any conflicts, RelStorage can help here to really make a better experience for the editors. And also, this is mainly because the transactions are faster, and it's mainly because of that you don't have so many conflicts, because a fast transaction means not so big probability of a conflict. Shit, wrong one. Okay, hit by the presentation. Here we go. Here. So here we go. Another big advantage of RelStorage is that we have a system that is also very mature. I think its roots are in 1973 with the start of Ingress, and then in 1980s somewhere Postgres started, and Postgres 95, that's the SQL-based post, this was Postgre, and then PostgreSQL was 1995. So this SQL-based Postgres database is has the same age as ZODB, kind of, and it's also very mature. And today is also an active open source project. It stuck a bit, and in the for some years, but now in the last years it was lots of contributions and new versions. And so we could say that your system administrator will love you if you say, I use a Postgres database, not some strange unknown ZODB. So if you come to a company and want to sell your Plone, and it's a bigger company with an infrastructure, and they have already a Postgres, it can just be used, right? So you have to plug in there and say, I want to have a database, give me a database in there, and I can work. That's also kind of advantage. And also the system administrator or the tuning on the performance of the database is not on your side, not on the application side. It's really a thing you can pass over to the people that have good knowledge about databases. And yeah, since it's an active open source project, we may also improve RelStorage in future, because RelStorage was developed for Postgres 8, and now we are on 9. And there are some new features we have to look at if RelStorage may get faster by using this. So we have these shiny features of RelStorage at all. First, you can do something that's not possible with ZODB. You can work history-free. So usually you have this append-only thing, and all old transactions are still available. And sometimes that's really handy to have all transactions available. You can roll back transactions, and even after half a day or something like that. But if you have larger sites, then there are so many writes that it's nearly impossible to do something, to do an undo on something that happened half a day ago, because there are so many writes in advance that it will fail. And in such setups, it makes sense to work history-free. History-free means, in fact, that that no old transactions are kept, and it speeds up things a lot. Also, in a RelStorage setup, the amount of writes is reduced on the Postgres database or on any database. Also, the client, the RelStorage client, uses Memcached instead of disk cache. It's also a big advantage because the Memcache can be shared between several ZOAP instances. And it supports replicas of databases, and it's also nice. And very important is also that you can, usually in a ZODB and a ZEO client server setup, the server notifies the client that something changed. It's not possible with a SQL database, so you have to query if something changed. That querying all the time is has some costs, right? But you can reduce it in read-only or mostly read-only scenarios by polling in intervals. So you can define how often to poll the stuff. Also very handy is that there's a really good converter available. You can convert nearly any from RelStorage back to ZEO and so on, or from file. You can even convert from a file storage local to a ZEO-Server with it. It doesn't matter so much. It's just an interface from one storage to another storage. So here we are as a cache. That's a very important thing. You still have the memory caches for the different pools, connection pools. So we come back to this pooling. It means if you have a ZEO, if you have a ZOAP instance, it has, for instance, 4 threads, and each thread gets, if a request comes in, connection from the connection pool. And if the request ends, or the response was done, and the cycle ends, it gives back the connection to the connection pool. And this is about the pools, not about the threads itself. And it's possible that one thread gets different connections. And so if you have 4 threads, if we have load on this and all 4 threads are used, there's up to 4 memory caches and connections in the connection pool. And they all can share one, about the Memcache client, they can share one Memcache server. And a second instance then can use the same data from the same Memcache. So if an instance polls data from, if something changed, it also invalidates the Memcache server. So another instance now has an invalidated data and can fetch the data again, or if data was fetched before and is available in the Memcache for another instance. So that's also very important. It's an advantage here. Yeah. How to get this fast? That's always a question. How to configure all this stuff. First, what I always say in every talk is never store blob data in the ZODB or in the Postgres or something like that. It always slows down things because you have big chunks of data in there, and it pollutes the caches. It also you'd have to transfer lots of data. So if you use blob storage, it's good. If you have a Plone 4 or 5, I think, 4, 3 latest or 5. As far as I know, there's everything now in blob storage, but many add-ons are not written that well, and you have to look if your add-on may store some blobs in the ZODB or blob-like data. Next thing is you have to configure the database, Postgres or whatever you have properly. Postgres defaults are very conservative. You really don't want to use them. You need to tune it from the beginning, even if you just try it. Otherwise, you're disappointed. And if you do go into production with it, you have to learn about these settings. And you have max connections, max buffers, the effective cache size. And even for max connections, you have to know if you have a larger cluster of ZEO clients and you have all these connections, there's no pooling built in with RelStorage. Maybe we should change it in future for bigger scenarios. But so if you have no pooling built in, you get a lot of connections on the Postgres database. That means a lot of connections consume a lot of memory. The ZEO-Server has a very low memory footprint, but the Postgres database needs memory to work. And so anyways, the Postgres database loves also disk cache, right? So in memory, the operating system disk caching thing. So you don't have to load all those objects all the time. From my experience, it also, last year there's a question about SSDs. Now we have tested it with SSDs and speeds up things a lot. So if you have SSDs for your Postgres database, it's just like, I don't know how much. I did measures, I have to say, but it really feels much faster. And so all these parameters are documented very well. Postgres has really good docs. There are a lot of blog entries about it and experience. People tell their experience in the blog entries. And so it really depends a bit on your setup. So it's not, you can't say do it this way or do it the other way around. If you have a plain Plone, yes, then you could say it. But usually in such environments like here, what the web does with EEA, and European Environmental Agency, that's very special site with special parameters, and so they need to tune all the stuff. And now I think it's all on Postgres. And there was a speed up of, I think, 2 times, right? Also here, yeah. And there are some parameters that you won't turn off all the time, but for some cases, like if you want to import the database or the data, the first step before going live, it helps if you have a very fast database. And you can turn off things like the fsync, the file system sync. So that's not after every transaction sync is done. So that speeds up things like factor 6 to 10. So you can really, for a one-time import, switch it off and then switch it back. And then your import takes an hour instead of all the day. Right? It's also important features, but go not into production with them. Otherwise, you may have corrupted data if somebody just pulls the plug on your server. And also, we're talking about Memcached. This means, in my opinion, it's good to have one Memcache per machine. So if you have several machines rendering your data, like several ZODB clients, then it's good to have it. It's also possible to have one central Memcache, but then you have everything over the network. And if you have it all local, you can use Unix sockets, for instance, to connect to Memcached and so on. It speeds up things a bit, and also it's a bit more efficient. On the other hand, it's also important that you have not the same Memcache as used, for instance, for LDAP caching or for the classical caching you have in your client. So for page caching or whatever you cache in your site, you can use Memcache. But I will use a dedicated Memcache for the database. Then another thing you can do, and that's also may speed up things, you can split, if you have a site with lots of editors, but also lots of anonymous users, you can split it up into 2 clusters. And one cluster only for anonymous means that you can have a long poll request. If the polling results in data that is outdated for 10 seconds, or maybe for 1 minute or 10 minutes, you can choose, then the save of the editor does not appear immediately on the site, but it means, on the other hand, that you don't need to query the database such often, and that speeds up things a lot. So it's also possible to split it up into 2, for anonymized without writes, and 1 for editors without poll interval set to some value. That's one of the base ideas. So that was my introduction, and now is the idea of the whole talk also, and I wrote it to have some question session, a longer one, with space for questions, and I hope it's, you got it from the description that I planned it that way. Otherwise, we have a short talk. So, yeah, that's the idea. So, questions? Many, okay. The microphone? Several hands up.
Hello, thank you. Let's say we, at our academy where I work, we wanted to implement RelStorage. My question is, we have a setup that is very typical. We have an Apache server. We have a couple of soaps that are running. They connect to the ZODB. We have Squid Cache in the middle because we don't use Varnish, but that's our regular setup. My question is, which parts do you actually need to change in order to use RelStorage?
Just replace the ZEO-Server with a Postgres database and implement a Memcache on each of the servers that does the rendering, the ZEO, the ZOB clients. And then you change the setup to use RelStorage and convert your database to RelStorage. And the conversion is in place, so you can redo it and have some maintenance window and then switch it, and then you're on RelStorage. So it's not the whole chain before the publishing chain is not influenced in any way by RelStorage.
And another very little question is, a Memcache Demon, the design of Memcache Demon is that it doesn't necessarily run on one machine. It can run on many machines and sync up, right?
Memcache itself doesn't sync with the another Memcache server, so it's a separate Memcache.
Okay, per machine.
Yeah, you can configure to use several Memcache in a chain if one Memcache doesn't have, ask another one and so on. But I don't see a big advantage in it. Next one.
So you said there was a speed improvement of up to 2 times possible. So what kind of parameters is that dependent upon? Many reads. So
sorry, I didn't get the last.
What kind of parameters is that dependent upon? So when do you get an improvement of 1.1 and when do you get an improvement of 2?
It depends really on your setup. Usually, if what the main goal is to reduce the time of the transaction, right? The whole transaction. If you write something, and even on read, you can reduce the time to read stuff. And with the caching is very important here. For anonymous users, you can tune a lot. You think you can get more than 2 times because if you have a very high poll interval, then you read the data only from the Memcache. That's very fast. And it always depends on what's done in your on your application side. So if your application is tuned already, right, then you can get much out of it. If you have there some issues where your page rendering is not perfect or something like that, then it helps, but it's not the solution for this problem. So you have a different solution space or problem space and need other solutions. But if you have already tuned, like at EA, they tuned everything, right? And then it was still slow. And then they used Postgres and RelStorage, and it helped. But it also, you have keep in mind, it takes a while to get. If you have a large setup, took for them, I think, up to 4 months, right, to get this thing all tuned and tested and ready for production. So it's not the thing. If you have a smaller site, it gets faster. But if you have a really large setup with many add-ons and so on, you really need to check everything if it not has some side effects. Even if you have some asynchronous task running, you have to think about how it's influenced by this change and so on and so on. So usually it can be much faster if you already have tuned a lot, and it can get up to twice the time. Because a limit is always this transaction conflict stuff in SOAP. Because we have the catalog, the catalog is a problem in that case, because if you index one thing and index another thing, it writes on the same object on the catalog for some probability in the B trees there, and then you get this clashes and the conflicts. And if it comes to many writes, then it goes some exponential thing up.
Thanks.
Who is in charge with the RelStorage package? Because maybe we do a sprint to update it to use features from Postgres 9.9.4. I mean, there are some hard-coded, like I don't know, isolation transaction is strict, and now in RelStorage in Postgres 9, there are more options, and we can make it even faster.
Yeah, I think there's still room for improvements. That's the nice thing about it. If you switch to it in future, you can really say, if many people using it and many people are contributing back to RelStorage, more than it's now doing, it's just a handful of people, then it would be possible to even boost it anymore.
I like RelStorage. The question for my is, at the moment, we do have an abstraction layer so that you can use MySQL, Oracle, and Postgres. Might it be a good idea to say, let's deprecate it, make a Postgres storage that just focus on Postgres and the features of Postgres 9 so that you can go ahead, use the new features of the Postgres 9 series, probably also the NoSQL features that Postgres already bring with in. So to speed even more up with that. And we see on the other side how many users are still using plain MySQL or not going to MariaDB, or who is even using the Oracle
I just
feature.
know that John used it for an internet project at times, but I don't know if anybody at the moment using the Oracle adapter. For sure, you can just create a new project just only for optimized for Postgres. That's I think Andreas is also anyway. So I think it's for sure possible, but it's a bunch of work because it's also difficult. It's not so easy to write this code, right? It's not just doing it, because it's difficult to test it, difficult to measurements on it, and so on and so on. And I think Shane, who maintains the project, did a great job here, and also has a lot of hooks in where you can do measurements, how this thing behaves, and so on and so on. And yeah, maybe you should discuss this with maintainers if it's a good idea or if it's a bad idea, because there's a lot of experience in there.
So I was going to say, to pick up on that last point, the history of RelStorage is the reason for the Oracle compatibility was RelStorage was created not for performance reasons. RelStorage was originally created for policy reasons. And that was that John had a client who had a policy that was all data is in Oracle, end of story. And if you don't adhere to that policy, you don't come through our door. So that was the original creation for RelStorage, was to be able to do that. And there's some sense in that, and they can leverage their existing backup, replication, et cetera, all the tools. It used to be, it's not so much the case now, but 10 years ago, if you mentioned database, when you mentioned ZODB, everybody thought of relational databases. And they'd say, oh, we'll get our SQL admins to look at it. And they would look at ZODB and go, what's this? Now, the world has caught up with NoSQL, and they understand these things now, finally. But the thing I don't understand with RelStorage is the ZODB is really, really simple in what it's doing. Or rather, the ZEO-Server is really simple in what it's doing. And what RelStorage does is just store the pickles in a table as blobs. It's not doing anything with SQL. It's not using any of the features of an SQL engine. It's literally taking something from the wire and storing it to disk, and retrieving it from disk and sending it back down the wire. So I still don't understand how we're getting a two times performance increase on something that simple that we can't achieve through doing something better with the ZODB and ZEO. Because the issues you talk about with the catalog are nothing to do with RelStorage. That's happening regardless.
Yeah, also I think the ZODB could be speed up too, if somebody put a thought in it. But I looked at the ZODB code and it screwed my brain, right? So that's not code that is easy to read, not code that is easy to understand, and there are not so many comments in there, if any. And also the variable names are not very speaking. So if you want to get contributions on ZODB outside of the current circle of persons that understand it, I think you would change first that basic thing about readability and so on and so on, and then document all this stuff and make people understand it and get good brains on it. And yeah, I think it's possible to do this.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, why do it twice the time? Yeah, I think our Postgres optimizes a lot. It's good indexes and so on and so on. And we could also change the ZEO client to use Memcache instead of this cache. Why not? Should be possible. And that would speed up ZODB, I think, also a lot. Also, we should think about, this notification costs some time. If it can be done different, maybe, yeah, like that. I think it's about RelStorage is good because it's initially made because of policy, but I think it's still in the enterprise world. There's still this attitude that SQL databases are the real thing. And if you go to a customer, from my experience, you have to say nothing. If you say we need a PostgreSQL database, it's just like yes, okay, fine. If you say we need ZODB, you start get questions and explaining and so on and so on. And so for me, it's also from the selling database point of view or selling point of view, it's a good thing to have it.
I have one question and one note. First, the ZDB is originally very bad on writes because all writes are serialized. Is this somehow solved in with RelStorage? So basically, is it possible to do concurrent writes, or is it still serialized?
It's if you have the same object with a different transaction written at the same overlapping time, you get in conflict anyway. It's the same as with ZODB. I think this could be solved, but that's more, then you have to change the layout how the ZODB or how the pickle is stored.
But just imagine having two transactions modifying two different objects. Let's say multiple file uploads occurring at the same time. So are they still serialized or are they written at the same time?
Still serialized, yeah. But I think the question Alex said is it possible to make a pure adapter that solves it, but then you have to take into account all the specialties of this database you're using. So it's the thing when you have Postgres only adapter and think Postgres does it that way, and we can do the logs and so on in this order, then we can have parallel writes possibly.
And just note,
but it's a complete new adapter then. That's not what we have with RelStorage today.
Just one note on Matt's and
you take the microphone.
Your comment. Perhaps it wouldn't make sense, for example, to make use of Postgres features like JSON and so on. For example, switching from a pickle format to, let's say, JSON, and then use, for example, just store the instance stick as JSON in some way, if that would be possible, in a transparent and compatible way, and then make use of indexing features of Postgres on the JSON layer, for example.
I'm not sure. Is anybody now there's a JSON pickle around already? I know. It should be possible. Why not? There was also a kind of XML pickle. I don't want it.
Just another note about Matt's idea about why can't we do the same with ZODB. What I understand, I mean, I've watched this talk, not exactly this one, last year and the year before, and there is always new information. And now I think I got the big picture. You gain the main performance gain is using a Memcache shared across instances of the same machine instead of having the file system cache per client for just those 4 threads or whatever, how many threads you run, the object cache. So if we could manage to have a Memcache, replace this per client cache that's not shareable between the clients with a Memcache instance, I think we'll get like 80% closer to what you've got with RelStorage currently, and still can go with ZEO, because you need to replace ZEO, right?
No, don't. With RelStorage, you don't have ZEO in this way.
Yeah.
The ZEO is just ZEO client server. It's a file FS storage on a network connection.
So in order you to use blob storage shared across clients on different servers, you need some file system that allows you, network file system for the blob storage.
Blob storage stays the same with RelStorage, so almost.
Almost. You need some network file storage, right?
Yeah, so you can store blobs in the database, and I read that it's okay with Oracle, but I never tried it myself. So, yeah, I don't really know if.
So the point
is a good idea.
My point is that the setup gets more complex using RelStorage. The argument where people say, SQL is fine, ZODB, what is it? It's a problem people are facing, but if we could have some proof, like this is the same instance running on ZEO with ZODB, this is the instance running with Postgres, and it's like 2% performance hit or whatever, it would be an argument too.
Okay, I didn't measure it with the same instance, but Aline did a great job with Docker containers, where you can really have almost same Plone setups in containers. So you just have to fire up the containers and can do measurements. It would be a great idea to have some to do really measurements on these different setups and see what's again on a plain Plone with, say, about 10,000 items or something like that is.
Would be very interesting. Also to file some tickets for the ZODB to just ask Dress, for example, if there is an idea about how to use this shared cache.
Yeah, it would improve ZODB, right? Yeah, right away. But I don't think that the RelStorage setup is such more complex, right? Because you just need have a Postgres. You can install it on system level if you like. ZEO-Server, you can't install on system level. You can't say apt-get install ZEO-Server. It's not possible. So you need some kind of build-out and so on and so on to have a ZEO-Server on a different machine. From my point of view, it's setting up a database on a Postgres is not much more different, or is less difficult for usual non-ZOAP person, right? Is used to all the Linux stuff and so on. It's easier to set up a Postgres database than to set up a ZEO-Server. So I don't think it's more complex. And in your build out, you have just a different configuration where you say use this database. So only thing you have additional is a Memcache, but you have it anyway in bigger setups.
Sure.
So I don't know if you can say it's more complex.
A little.
Sorry. The thing is that ZEO is one point of failure, and with RelStorage you can replicate, and you can have one cluster for anonymous user, one for the others, and you can sync. With ZEO, it's more complicated to clusterize this part.
Clustering is a ZOAP replication service that used to be commercial for some years now, also available. So it's maybe also possible to do with a ZOAP replication service. Never tried it. Yeah, but I think Postgres is like, you tell your system administrator, I need a replicated Postgres. That's from a, if you're a one-person show, then it's, yeah, one thing. But if you have a company with several persons, with several system administrators, with operation and so on, you go to operation and say, I need this and this and that, and that's easy. And that's not so easy with ZEO-Server, from my experience at least. Other questions? No? Okay. Oh, there's another question. Okay.
One question for this higher poll interval for read-only clients.
Yeah.
So when I read, also makes write to the databases. For example, if I'm using the image traverser and there is no, and does this lead to any problems? So getting the same image scale 10 seconds afterwards because somebody else watched the same page containing the same image with the same scale?
Okay. Okay, one thing is that the write on read is always bad. Anyway, I would try. I don't really like that we have this in Plone, right? Because it makes things difficult. It's on the other hand, if you have lots of requests, you have a poll interval of really some milliseconds, like 300 milliseconds or something, helps at this to reduce the load on the database. If you have like 10 seconds, you have a problem here. Yeah. If the next request hits a different instance, you don't have a different connection from the pool, you don't have the data available at this moment. But on the other hand, if you write, you invalidate the memcache, so it has to read it anyway. So that's also, if you do a write, then it invalidates the memcache and the caches at this write. But if you have different memcache, then it won't get invalidated, and then you have a problem. So if it's all on one machine and on one memcache, it's not a problem. But if you have more machines with different memcaches and it hits a different machine, it's a problem. But on the other hand, you can then configure your load balancer to route people only to one machine. I would do it anyway because you have or cluster it by language or something like that. One thing for German, one for English, one for Italian. And then if in normal operation, if nothing is wrong, then route people from one language to this cluster and so on. And then you stick to the cluster. So it helps also to have the caches used in a better way. So that only the data for German language is in one cache and only for English is in other cache and so on. So yeah. That's another optimization that's possible on this way. And then you can say, okay, if we have this problem with writes on read, then we can solve it using a load balancer in front to make sure that it's only from one memcache.
Thanks.
Okay. Do we have time or still? Otherwise, there's one question left. Sven? Yeah, one last question. Another question over there. I don't know what time we have. I think we're over time. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Just a remark about this whole Docker thingy and if people starting using it. Have in mind that you start trying it on Docker, you will never get the same results as on your bare system because you have to take in mind you add at least one other layer of a file system, means ZFS, BTFS, OFS, device member, or whatever, meaning your results will be different anyway. Then also it depends if you use Memcache also as a Docker container, meaning you add something to your network stack. You can do that, but then you really have to take in mind this setup is built for Docker and it's different from what you see on your file system. Not that people getting disappointed if that's right and it's completely different.
Okay, but for measurements, I would say it would work. Yeah. I think there's one question over there, and that's I think the last one for today. Otherwise, we are over time.
Are there plans to support Python 3?
Never thought about it. But I think ZODB itself is available for Python 3, so it should be easy to make RelStorage. There's no much magic, and that could not be done in it's pure Python. So why not? Yeah, it's just a matter of work to be done. If it's not already, no, I think it's not. I think it needs some work to be done, but then you can use it with Python 3. Okay, thank you.